I work as a business consultant. I'm Rick Hermonot. I've been with Farm Credit East for 30 years now. It's kind of hard to believe it's been that long. Went to UConn, graduated with animal science back in 1981. Kind of fun because 3 of my children have since graduated with degrees in animal science from UConn. I'm kind of excited about that. But I've worked with Farm Credit, former dairy farmer though. I used to milk cows in Connecticut, Western Connecticut. Went to work for Farm Credit, as I say, for 30 years now. I've worked as a loan officer. I've worked as a real estate appraiser. And for the past 16 years, I've been a business consultant, which is kind of my niche now within Farm Credit. I really love what I do. I have the opportunity to sit down at the kitchen table, walk around the barnyard, meet with farm families all over New England. And our mission as consultants is to help our clients achieve their objectives. So I sit down, we figure out, sometimes it's a big piece of the puzzle to figure out what are our objectives, what is our vision, what is it we want to focus on. And then my job is to help them get there. And it's kind of fun because we're exploring different pathways with different families all the time. And, but I also, our dairy farm transitioned to a turkey farm, and so we're still farming. My family and I have a farm in Sterling. We farm 360 acres. Raise turkeys, grain corn, hay, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, pumpkins, and we have a corn maze and a farm store with homemade ice cream and all that sort of thing. So we've transitioned our wholesale dairy to a retail farm. And you know, SCORE, getting back to that, the value of entrepreneurial involvement is huge. I mean, to be able to sit down and talk to someone who's actually done it is huge. And I find that as a consultant now, yeah, I learned a lot at UConn, and I learned a lot working at Farm Credit and working with farm families. Amazing what I've learned from the families I work with. But having done it is a huge, valuable resource to me working with other folks. Having been in the trenches and knowing what the challenges are like really makes a big difference. What we're going to talk about this morning for the next hour and a half or so is unleashing the power in your records. How many here are farmers or wannabe farmers? We've got about half of you. The other half, I've met many of you, know many of you, you're working with farm families through one organization or another. So we've got both perspectives here, so then that's great. What I want to talk about is how many here love numbers? Well, we got a couple, but usually there's not a whole lot. I mean, if we're in agriculture or we're serving agriculture, usually we're not really, you know, all about numbers. I do love numbers. Math was my favorite subject in school. I came to work at Farm Credit partly because I really love the numbers side of things. But over the years, 30 years of working with farm families, most entrepreneurs, most business owners, whether you're agriculture or non-other business, numbers are not what you're all about. You're about, you know, the vision for the business and milking cows or growing crops or whatever it is. And the numbers become almost like, oh, well, we got to deal with it because we got to pay taxes. We got to deal with it because we got payroll to deal with and payroll taxes. We got all that stuff that we have to do. My objective is to get folks more and more often to start focusing on the numbers for business management rather than just to get their tax return done. There's tremendous value in those numbers. And so the tools we're going to talk about here, a financial toolbox that I put together that really helps to bring those numbers to life for a business owner in a way that we can relate to as entrepreneurs, rather than, you know, these seas of numbers that need to be used for getting tax returns done and all that. You know, the bigger picture, what's our business doing? What are our numbers telling us about how we're performing? And how can we better manage our business as a result? One of the things I want to kind of hit right out of the gates is this concept of the point of diminishing returns. Throughout the whole toolbox that I'm going to go through today, and then we're going to finish up with a case study where we can show how to implement these in an actual business plan. But this concept kind of rings through all of it. The point of diminishing returns. One really easy way to think about this is if you're going to initiate an exercise regimen, right? If we're doing nothing, we're a couch potato today, you know, we're down here, right? And as we start to put energy or input into our exercise program, if we start running 3 miles a day, 3 days a week, we're getting huge value, huge health potential out of that, right? So the amount of energy we're putting into it is giving us huge returns, right? 3 hours, 3 miles a day, 3 days a week. But if we step that up to 3 miles a day, 7 days a week, we're getting more health benefits out of it, but it's not as big as that first slug was. Then if we go to 10 miles a day, 7 days a week, we're starting to get a diminishing return out of that. It's probably starting to eat into the rest of our life. Maybe the time we have to spend with our families or our spouses, or maybe impacting work, because we're putting so much time every day into exercising. I've got a friend who measures his miles run in tens of thousands. He's up to, I think, 70,000 miles he's run in his lifetime. He's about my age. I think he went, in an exercise regimen, he'd argue with me, but I think he's out here, where he's putting in so much time that he's getting a reduced return on what he's my age, he's already had hip replacement, his knees are shot, he's run so many miles that he's worn his body out. So that's a good way to think about this, but this applies in business all the time, to everything we do. Another example would be feeding a dairy cow. We can put, if we're not giving a cow any grain, she's producing at a very low level. If we give her $1 worth of grain, she's probably going to give us $3 or $4 worth of milk back from that first little bit of grain we give her. We give her another $1 worth of grain, she might give us $2 worth of milk back. Eventually, we're going to give her another $1 worth of grain, and we're only going to get $1 of milk back. That is the point of diminishing return, where the amount of input equals the value we're getting out of it. Where is that point? Figuring out that point is not easy, okay? And it applies to not only your exercise routine, it applies to in financial investments in our business. And so we want to really kind of figure out, and the tools that we're talking about today are going to help us figure out, how do we get here? Because this is where we're getting the best return. If we keep investing beyond that, we start going backwards. We give that cow another $1 worth of grain, we might only get 50 cents of milk back. And if we're only getting 50 cents back from $1, we're going backwards in profitability, and we're out beyond this point of diminishing returns. We're getting a negative return. I see a lot of businesses out here. Chris will get into this with his benchmark discussion later, but when we look at businesses, there's 3 very major styles of business management that we see out there among farm families. One is the cost control, all about tight with a buck. I don't like to spend money. I'm tight with a buck. Those guys, where do you think on this curve, where do you think they are? If I don't like to spend money, I'm tight with a buck, where would I be on this curve? Right here, exactly, Joyce, right here. What it's saying is we don't like to spend, we're very conservative. If we spend another $1 on grain for our cow, she might give us $2 worth of milk, but we're too conservative, we're tight with a buck, we're not going to push as hard financially. So cost control guys tend to be down here, and then another style is I'm all about the top line. I'm all about production. In the dairy world, it's the highest herd average in the state or in the county. In the retail world, I just want customers coming in my door. I'm an ag retail business like our ice cream. We just want more people coming in. One way might be, we'll keep our prices low so more people come in. But if we're all about the top line, we just want to drive production or drive volume of our business, we tend to live out here. Because if we want more customers in the store, maybe we spend more money on advertising. A lot more money on advertising. Maybe we're beyond the point of diminishing returns. We spent an extra $1,000 in advertising and we only got 5 customers out of it. Well, that didn't do the job for us. So we're spending too much. We're feeding cows, we're giving them that extra $1 worth of grain to get 50 cents worth of milk. But we're all about more production. So those that are really top line focused, all about productivity, tend to live out here. So we could be a cost control guy here, we could be a production-minded guy here making the same profit with different levels of productivity. Then the third style that we see are the ones who are really focused on efficiency. Efficiency means I'm not afraid to spend money, but I got to make sure that the money I spend is going to get me a return. And we're going to talk about that today in these tools. The guys who are focused on efficiency tend to dwell here more often. Okay? So now, One of the things we see, and dairy business is a good example because of the volatility of price. You know, we go from, in the last 5 years, we go from a price that's down around $14, $15 all the way up to $25. Huge swing in price in a 5-year period. In a really high price year, who's going to fare the best? When you're getting a lot of money for your product. These guys actually fare very well in a high price year because they're pushing hard, but they're getting a lot of money for their product, so they're getting good reward for that extra investment. When the price is really low and everybody's struggling, who do you think fares the best? The cost control guy, exactly. So the ones that live down here. So in a really low price environment, these guys do better. Real high price environment, these guys do better. These guys tend to do better on a steady as she goes way. One of the things I've learned working with clients is that that style that you have tends to come from here, and it's hard to change it. If I'm excited every day by having the cows dripping milk when they come in the parlor and have my bulk tank overflowing with milk, that's what gets me motivated. It's hard to get them to become motivated by something different. And if I'm just tight with a buck, I don't like spending money, I'm very conservative, it's hard to get those folks to change their style. So our default styles, to me, are very, very important to understand because that drives where I am here, and it also helps you tweak in order to maximize results. But it's not always easy to change that. So what we're going to talk about today, within the context of that point of diminishing returns, is these 5 fives toolbox that I've put together over the years working with clients. And I've found that as entrepreneurs, we don't like to deal with, 5 pages of numbers in our earnings reports. And that's what most folks have now with QuickBooks or Centerpoint that we sell at Farm Credit. These record-keeping systems offer us tremendous amounts of detail, lots of numbers. And even a numbers-focused guy, I'll pull one of those 5-page reports with hundreds of numbers on it, and I'll see the bottom line is not what the client wants, so that's probably why he called me. We need to improve our bottom line. Our profit isn't good enough to sustain our business long term. We can see that the bottom line isn't good, but beyond that, you can't see anything. It's just a sea of numbers, even for a numbers guy. So these tools are designed to take that sea of numbers and boil it down to something that really allows us to understand what's going on with the business. So these are the 5 tools that we're going to go through. I like to think of it as like you've got a tool belt on. And if as a business owner you can get to learn these 5 pockets in your toolbox, what they are, and each one has 5 components to it. I like the 5 fives because it helps me remember them. It just simplifies that. If we can realize that these 5 fives are in our tool belt all the time as business owners, these are great things to just pull out and use to make good business decisions on the fly and as we progress through the years of developing our business. First one is 5 keys to effective focus. We'll talk about those 5 keys. The next one, 5-line income statement, boiling that 5 pages of numbers down to 5 lines and what those 5 lines mean. 5-year averages, why is that important in agriculture? The dirty 5, which is a way of assessing capital investments. And finally, the 5 keys to profitability. What are they and how do they help us stay balanced in our management approach? This first one is the 5 keys to focus. Working with farm businesses, I'll never forget one of my first clients that I dealt with up in Vermont years ago. When I got to his farm, I was meeting with his sister and his son before he came in. He was kind of the lead manager of the business. There's always seems to be one person that is that key decision maker, and he was that person. But he came in about 20 minutes late. I was already working with his sister and his son at the table, and he comes in, and as he's shaking hands with me across the table, we got our hands, he's looking me right in the eye, and he goes, "I'm not going to learn anything from you, and I'm not going to learn anything from your numbers, but you are going to learn a lot from me. So how about I bill you for this?" And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm going to enjoy working with this guy because I like working with businesses that challenge me and that are really present in our discussions. And I could tell this guy was going to be. And I responded with the first thing that came to mind, which sometimes isn't a good thing for me, but it affected him in the right way. I said, you know, you're absolutely right. I answered honestly. I said, you're absolutely right. I learn more from every one of my clients than they learn from me. I said, but that's what makes me valuable to you, because I've been at 50 different businesses in the past 6 months, and I'm seeing what they're doing and what's working and what isn't. And I can bring that perspective to your table, which you can't get that perspective because you're here running your business. And he kind of furrowed his brow at me and said, good answer. He said, I'll pay your bill this year. We'll see about next, but I'll pay your bill this year. And the thing I learned from this farm, and this farm ended up being the most financially successful business I've ever worked with in my 30 years. It blew me away what these guys can do. And what I learned from them as I started to work with this family was that they are intensely focused on the bottom line. Not necessarily the bottom line of the business is where they get to. It's not their initial focus, but they are intensely focused as a family. And so I learned from them and all my other clients that are highly successful, but this one is where it really clicked for me. The key to success in whatever you do is focus. And we'll talk a little bit more about the components of that. That once you figure out what it is you want to focus on, that's your vision. Number two, what are your priorities that you're going to follow when you get there? You know, probably one of the most dramatic examples of this working is our current president. How did he win this election as an outsider? Whether you like him or hate him, how did he win this election? And I would say this is how he did it, right here. He focused on a vision. Anyone who was listening to him knew what his vision was. It was on every hat that was out there. He had a vision. And then he had priorities. How are we going to make that vision happen? 1, 2, 3. He had them clearly laid out, over and over and over. Using this focus with a vision and priorities, and then combine that with hard work, discipline, and passion, you can make anything happen. Key is, what is your vision? That's not always easy to figure out. What is it do we need to focus on? And then once we figure that out, what are our priorities? In a business plan, you know, the vision is step one, and step two is objectives. We call them objectives in business planning, but to me that's the same as priorities. Are we going to be organic or are we going to be conventional? Are we going to be profitable or are we not so focused on profit? Seems like a silly question, but I've worked with families that have less focus on profit. That's not what it's all about. Sustainability is important, but they aren't first and foremost focused on profit. Are we going to have a pathway to succession for future generations of our family? Or is that not important to us? What are our priorities as we build this business and we run this business and we develop this family legacy that we have? So vision and priorities are the first two steps to focus. They're not as easy as they sound because, as I said earlier, first step when I go out to meet with a family is, okay, where is it we want to go? Here's where we are today. That's easy to know. Where is it we want to be 20 years from now? Not everybody can define that. So that first step in focusing is not an easy one. It's a fun one, though, because it's the process of dreaming and exploring where is it we want to be. And what priorities will we follow as we go there? Then the next three, once you figure that out, is hard work. We got to work hard. But if we work too hard, what can happen? Burnout. And another key is passion. If we're not passionate about our vision, then we're not going to be successful making it happen. And if you work too hard, you come at risk of burnout, which snuffs out the passion. So those two have to work together. And then the third one, and probably the most difficult, is discipline. This family in Vermont that I mentioned, it was the best performing farm I've ever seen. Their level of discipline was amazing. Every decision they make, they put through a filter of efficiency. Will this improve efficiency on our farm? And if it will, then we'll move forward with it. If it won't, we won't do it. And they were absolute about that, every decision. But that farm, hands down, not only on financial level, the financial level was amazing. what they were able to do. They built a brand new freestall barn with slatted floors, brand new double 12 parlor, and heifer facilities, all brand new, and paid for it in 4 years, debt-free in 4 years, almost unheard of. In all my years as a loan officer and as a consultant, I've never seen anybody do that quick. So the amazing financial results, but also as a family, every time I showed up there, they were smiling. They were happy, they were upbeat, they were optimistic, positive. So they just had tremendous success, tremendous quality of life. And their level of hard work was intense, but almost every family I work with accomplishes that pretty well. I haven't come across too many lazy farmers in all my years. Their passion was there, they were upbeat and excited all the time. That one I have seen a problem with a lot, where folks are burnt out or worn down by years of hard work for little pay, and they just don't have the passion. So there's a lot of negativity. That's a self-defeating prophecy once that happens. And then the discipline, as I say. One time I was in on a conversation where there was a little bit of strife in this family, and one of the sons was stressed over the fact that he was feeling guilty for going to his son's soccer game. And it took him away from work at the farm. And in an afternoon when he was supposed to milk, if he had a soccer game to go to, he would hire one of the employees to work extra hours. He would pay him out of his own money, not out of the farm, to milk that milking so he could go to the soccer game. And he still felt guilty because he wasn't there, because they have such a work ethic in this family. And he was talking about that to raise the issue with the rest of the family. And the response was very supportive. Oh my gosh, there's no reason you should feel guilty. And they got into a really good discussion. But that opened the door to another topic that ties back to this discipline issue. They've got a line of really nice equipment on this farm. And it's amazing how good shape it stays in after years of intense use. And one of the things they do is they pressure wash every piece of equipment every night when they're done with it. Now they have a big self-propelled mower, you know, they paid $400,000 for. It's a big machine. You don't pressure wash it in 2 minutes. And when they get done mowing hay, it might be 9 o'clock at night, they get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to milk cows, they pressure wash it before they go to bed. Every night, every piece. So the son said, you know, one thing that would help us a little bit with the workload around here, we could go to once a week. And one of the brothers, uncles, who is very quiet at all meetings, hardly ever said anything, spoke up very aggressively and said, not going to happen as long as I'm alive. That's a slippery slope. First it's once a week, then it's once a month, then it's never. We will pressure wash every piece of equipment every night, period. You know, it surprised me, but that defined the discipline that they have in this farm. They stay with the small things that add up to the big things, and they really got tremendous results. They did, though, you know, it was probably the most valuable meeting we've ever had there because it opened the door to the intensity of workload that some of them were feeling. The younger generation was feeling more so than the seniors because the seniors never went to soccer games. And the younger generation wants to do that. So they were able to have a good, productive discussion about how we can allow that to happen. Quality of life is important to this family, and they were achieving it as well. You know, this whole concept of focus is really the roots of a business plan. I find a business plan to be the best tool out there for achieving higher levels of focus in a business. Not all businesses actually have a written business plan, but they still achieve high levels of focus. But this is a great tool. 4 steps to business planning that I follow when I do a business plan is writing a mission statement. That's defining that vision. Number 2, objectives. Those are your priorities, organic or conventional, profitable or not, open to future generations' succession, or no, we're not focused on that. We're going to liquidate this business when I retire because that's my 401k. I'm going to cash it in. Once we got those 2 defined, then in a business plan we write goals every year and we develop action plans to make those goals happen. It's basically the 4 steps to a business plan, and it's a tremendous tool for enhancing focus in a business. Any questions on focus? This is the only one that isn't numbers oriented, but it's huge. And these other tools help you focus your business on results. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. Joe mentioned how we wanted to do that. Don't be afraid to jump in and ask questions as we go. The second tool in our toolbox is the 5-line income statement. This one is, in my opinion, huge. It's huge for business owners who are not numbers geeks. And even me, who I would call myself a numbers geek, I don't like looking at 5 pages of numbers. They don't tell me anything. So we want to boil it down to a 5-line income statement. And what do I mean by that? Most farm income statements, I would say, if you boiled it down, would be a 3-line income statement. It would be income minus expenses equals net income. And that's how I see most QuickBooks records, most Centerpoint records at our farm credit program. Most records, Peachtree, whatever people are using for doing their records, they're showing income, and they're showing expenses, and they're showing net income. And even if you collapse it to the main account level, so it's just the main account showing, it's a multi-page report for many, many businesses. It's very cluttered. There's so many numbers that you just look at it and you glaze over. So I like to boil it down to a 5-line income statement at the big picture. And this is extremely powerful, and we'll talk about it in our case study here in a few minutes. But 5-line income statement doesn't just take sales minus total expenses to get net margin. It inserts 2 more lines. It's sales minus cost of goods sold equals gross margin. And then from gross margin, we subtract overhead to get net margin. Now, it's basically taking from what's more commonly seen on a farm income statement, all expenses, and we're breaking the expenses down between cost of goods sold and overhead. Why do we want to do that? Why is that important? It's amazingly valuable. If I see a set of records in this format, see those 5 lines, and I could see them in total dollars, or any of the accounting spreadsheets will convert it to percent of sales real quickly, real easily. So you could look at these numbers. I don't even need to see the total dollars. If I just know that the farm grossed $1 million, and then this is their 5-line income statement, just in percentages, there's a tremendous amount of information I know about that farm without even looking at any more numbers. Tremendous amount of information. And we'll talk about the 5 keys to profitability in a minute, but this comes back to this. If we have a 5-line income statement, our cost of goods from our sales gives us gross margin. Gross margin is our efficiency score. The higher our gross margin, the more efficient we are at converting raw materials into finished product. We'll revisit this in a minute. Overhead tells us how are we doing with our investments in our business. Typical farm has real estate, buildings, and equipment, and inventory. They have money tied up in those 4 big areas. So we got this big investment. And as the farm grows, we got bigger and bigger and bigger investment. That investment is where our overhead costs come from. And how much of our overhead costs that are tied to our infrastructure investment, how many pennies of every sales dollar go to pay those costs? If our business is in balance, it should be 25 cents roughly of every sales dollar. If we're spending 40 cents of every sales dollar, we have too much buildings, too much equipment, too much real estate tied up in our business for the amount of revenue we are able to generate. We've overcapitalized our business. If it's lower than this, that could be a good thing, but it could mean that we're running on very worn out older facilities. Could mean. It could mean we're a very capital efficient business. Either way. But this is huge. What do you think a Walmart income statement, 5-line income statement looks like? What do you think this number is on Walmart as a percent of sales? Anyone want to guess? Throw a number out. Someone's got to have a guess. What do you think Walmart does as a percent of sales?
Oh, 30%.
30?
Yeah.
10?
Easily.
Their net margin pretty much consistently it's actually declining a little bit in the last 2 or 3 years, but it's been consistently right around 5.5%. Net margin as a percent of sales, which is amazingly good for big companies. Their gross margin, what do you think that runs? And this is a goal I have for family farm businesses, these numbers. Where do you think Walmart's gross margin is?
20.
The better, the higher it is, the better. Lower it is, the worse in terms of profitability potential. This runs, yeah, a little over 20. You're about right, 22%. You know, their motto, what's their motto?
No prices.
We sell for less, right? So they keep their prices low. They're a volume game. We can't afford to be a volume game in farm family businesses. Whether we're retail or whether we're a production business, we can't afford to be 22% gross margin because our overhead tends to be, at best, 25%. So we'd be in the red. 22 minus 25 would be 3% in the hole here. They run very capital efficient because their stores do 100 million in sales. So their overhead is about 17%, gross margin about 22%. They're making about 5.5% net margin. We can do a lot better than that, and we have to do a lot better than that in small businesses because we can't make it up in volume like these big companies do, like a Walmart does. But once you see these 5 numbers, even as a percent of revenue, it opens up your eyes to what's going on with that business. Do I have a production efficiency problem? Farms that are way low on gross margin, 28%, are probably out beyond the point of diminishing returns. They're investing money that is not giving them an adequate return, and it's eroding their margins. That could be happening. If overhead is way too high, it's a different problem altogether. I see some businesses with good gross margin, 40%, but overhead is 45%, so they're losing money. Why is overhead so high? Well, there's 2 reasons. One could be I recently built a new store on my farm, if I'm a retail business. Or I recently put up a new barn, and I've got this huge overhead and I haven't grown into it yet. That's actually a good reason. Post-expansion, if I'm getting good gross margin and I have high overhead, well, I'm going to grow into it and shrink this overhead because I just made a big investment. I haven't grown my business yet into it. But I've also seen businesses that have been like this for a while and they haven't just done a big expansion and they just have too much investment. One of the things we affectionately refer to at Farm Credit as a lender is new paint fever. Does anybody ever hear that term? That business that always has to have the newest and the greatest and the best of everything. And so they have too much equipment, too many investments in their business. And so their overhead gets up, even if they're getting good efficiency, overhead is 45%, and they can never grow their business beyond enough to dilute that overhead down. This tells you an awful lot about where you are. Am I getting good target gross margin, which means I'm getting good production efficiency, which is converting raw materials, cost of goods, into finished product. This is your efficiency score. And then my capital investment. Tremendous amount of information about your business right there in those 5 lines. The third key is 5-year averages. Why would we care about 5-year averages in agriculture? Why would that be important? Fluctuation. We live in a very, very volatile environment in agriculture, especially if we're selling on a commodity level. I used to be a dairy farmer, and price volatility was huge. We had to ride that wave. You had to be able to strategize in a way that would allow you to survive the downturns. You always had to realize they were coming. Now that I'm in retail agriculture, we raise turkeys, we sell them through our store, we're retail. We're a little more steady as she goes, but we're still subject to volatility in feed prices and some of our input costs, and we're also subject to another big one, not commodity prices. What else do we have to deal with that varies a lot?
Grains, whatever you're feeding them?
Yeah, the cost of the grain, cost of inputs, not only the cost of the price of what we're getting for our product, but also the cost of what we're putting into our production. Feed costs, for example, fuel costs could be a big one. But what other factor do we have to face in agriculture that is volatile from one year to the next? And we've seen it here in Connecticut in the last 2 years. Weather, big time. Last year we had a drought. This year it was too wet. If we could average those 2 years out, we'd have a perfect year. But we had a wet year and a dry year. Maybe next year will be the perfect year. Let's hope. But we have volatility in weather as well. I put this one up just to show the dairy industry lives with tremendous volatility. Look at the price swings in the past 5 years. a low in 16 of 16 and change, and a high in 14 of 25 and change. Well, I said 15 earlier. It's almost a $10 swing, not quite. $9 swing within a 5-year period. What do you think that does to your net margins in that period? It's huge. Now, if I was thinking about building a new milking parlor, and it was $1 million investment, and I'm looking at it in this year, and I don't think about this, I just say, okay, my cost of production is $18, and I'm getting $16.85 for my milk. Should I build a parlor? I probably would be scared to, right? If I was budgeting based on that. Now, if back in 2014 my cost is $18, or $19, it was higher then, feed prices were higher. $19 cost, but I'm getting $25 for my milk. I'm making $6 a hundredweight. Would I want to build the parlor then?
Build 2.
I might build 2. Well, that's a good point, Chris, because what we tend to do if we focus on a good year is we overinvest. And then it comes back to bite us. And the one thing we do in a bad year is we underinvest. And then that comes back to bite us because we aren't as efficient for the future as we should be because we've been scared to invest. So if we make decisions based on this price or this price, we're going to make potentially bad decisions. So in agriculture, looking at 5-year averages, the average price is $20.40 over the past 5 years. If I budget using that price, I'm probably going to have a pretty good handle on sustainability of my decision. So it's hugely valuable in agriculture. I've had many, many families overinvest. I've seen them go out and buy, 4 new pickup trucks and paid cash for them in a good year back in 14. But they really couldn't afford that. But that year they had this extra money. Some of that extra money in 14 needed to be put aside in liquid form to help them get through this year. But if you're making all kinds of money and you go out and all 4 of us finally are going to get those new pickup trucks, and we spend 40 grand a pop times 4 of 160,000, we wrote a check for it. We could afford it. We didn't have to borrow money. It was easy. That was not a good decision because that 160,000 was needed to get through the downturn that was coming. And if we are aware of that and we plan around that, we're going to have a much more successful business. And if we plan based on this kind of a sustainable price, we're going to have much more sound decisions coming out of it. So 5-year averages is the third tool in this toolbox. It's very, very valuable. This shows the top and bottom results from the benchmark that Chris is going to talk about in a little while. In our benchmark at Farm Credit, look at the difference in bottom line results between the top and bottom profit group in the dairy industry. There's about 500-ish farms in this study, so this is a lot of data. And this is a 5-year average. For the past 5 years, the top profit group has averaged 16% net margin, their 5-line income statement. 44% production efficiency, 27% overhead efficiency, a little higher than the 25, and 14 drove that. We saw a lot of investment, and that drove overhead up a little bit. This used to be down around 24. It got up to 27 after 14. 2 things happened. Prices got good, so people felt better about investing, but also grain prices got really high. And so people invested in equipment to make more quality feed on their farm. And that investment was justified because feed prices that they were buying in were so high. If I could buy a big mower to mow hay more efficiently and a merger to merge it more efficiently so I could chop all my hay in a 2-day window, put up quality hay, the high feed costs supported that. So that drove this up. But still, they're at 27, the bottom group is 31. They've got too much investment relative to their sales, 31% going to overhead. Gross margin, look at the difference here. 14% difference in production efficiency, converting those raw materials into finished product. Tremendous difference. On a 5-year average basis, sustainable results, very, very solid. What do we say, Walmart? 5.5%? We're seeing, I said the goal is 15, and the top profit group of the dairy industry on a 5-year average basis is exceeding that goal. But the bottom profit group is losing money. It's telling us that management focus is huge. And now there could be some here that luck of the draw issues. an older family with no next generation coming on. They haven't invested. The farm is kind of in poor condition, and we're struggling. But then I've seen some that are in that boat that are making tons of money because they haven't reinvested, and they're getting ready to shut down when they retire. So that's not the entire reason. This is really driven by poor management focus, excellent management focus. The results difference is amazing. The fourth tool in our toolbox is the Dirty Five. We're going to use this one pointedly in my case study here in a few minutes. But the Dirty Five is a way to assess capital investment. That overhead cost in the 5-line income statement, the core overhead costs are these 5 expenses. And the Dirty Five is an acronym that helps us remember what those 5 expenses are. They are depreciation, interest, repairs, taxes, that's property taxes, and insurance. If we go out and buy a new tractor, put up a new greenhouse, build a processing facility for doing our turkeys, whatever we do in our business in terms of a capital investment, equipment, buildings, land, this Dirty Five kicks in on day one, whether we're using it or not. Another name for overhead costs are fixed expenses. They're fixed because once we make the investment, there's not a whole lot we can do. They're going to depreciate over their useful life, whatever we spent. We spend $100,000 on a tractor, and we figure it's got a 10-year life. It's going down $10,000 a year in value. I have clients who say, well, I got a 40-20 on my farm, John Deere, most popular John Deere tractor ever made. I have one at my farm. I love it. It's 50 years old, and it's worth more today than I paid for it new 50 years ago. And that's true. That's true. They sold for about $8,000, and they're selling today for 8 to 10. So we could argue this one a little bit, but in reality, as equipment gets used, it's losing value, and if we don't acknowledge that so that we have the money to replace it when it gets worn out, we're setting ourselves up for a problem. So depreciation is a very important expense to acknowledge, even though we don't write a check for it. If we don't, we have a term we like to refer to as living off depreciation. We don't recognize it. And we think we're making money, but we're not recognizing depreciation. The fact that our equipment and our buildings are wasting away, and someday they're going to be a pile of junk, and if we don't replace them, our business will lose viability at some point. So this is a very important expense, but it's the D in Dirty Five. Interest. That's an easy one, whatever we're paying our lender in interest rates. Well, I've had folks say, well, what if I'm not borrowing the money? I'm using my own cash. In a good year, I had extra profits. I'm using my own money to invest in that new tractor. Do I need to count interest? Now, the first question I ask is, and I know the answer because I'm working with the family, do you have any other debt? And yeah, very few businesses have no debt. Well, if you have other debt, you could have used that money to pay down that other debt. So I would argue you need to use that same interest rate as the interest cost of this investment. Because you're tying money up in this investment, and you have money tied up, you have money owed at 5%, whatever, 6%, whatever rate you're paying. And even if you're using cash, you could have used that cash to get rid of some of that debt and save that interest. So there is an opportunity cost to that investment. Repairs, once you buy it, you're going to start repairing it. And sometimes if you don't use it at all, the repairs can be higher on some things. But whether you use it or not, you got repairs on it, especially buildings. Building goes up, the roof weathers, whether you've got a cow in it yet or a turkey in it yet. It starts to depreciate and it starts to need to be repaired. Property taxes, once you build it, you're going to pay them. And insurance, once you build it, you've got to insure it. So those costs kick in as soon as I make an investment. Now, once I've made the investment, we call them fixed costs, overhead. How can we manage them? We can shop around for cheaper insurance. We can shop around for a better interest rate at a different lender. But those things have relatively limited opportunity. We still have to insure that $100,000 tractor. We still have to pay interest on it. We still have to repair it, pay property taxes on it, and it's going to depreciate. We can't do a whole lot about those costs. That's why we call them fixed costs. So how do we make that investment pay? We have to generate revenue with it. That asset has to increase the revenue of our business. It's the only way we reduce overhead costs from 40% of sales to 25%. We don't necessarily do it by downsizing overhead or getting cheaper insurance. We do it by growing sales and diluting overhead. So the strategy on overhead is different from the strategy on cost of goods. Cost of goods, we can't grow out of a cost of goods problem. We can grow out of an overhead problem if our gross margin is good. We'll look at that some more in our case study. This is an example. One of the neat things about the Dirty Five is each one of these numbers can be represented as a percentage of the investment. So it becomes a really easy number to get at the end of the day. We can look at, for example, a $100,000 hay merger. If we figure it's a 5-year investment, 5 years that machine is going to need to be replaced. What's our depreciation per year? Well, it's sitting up there so you can look at it, right? But 5 years, we got 100% of the investment is going to be used up in 5 years. So our depreciation per year is 20%. Straight line, nice and simple. It's important to remember that depreciation that goes on your tax return is not what we're talking about here. Tax return depreciation can be everything from Section 179, which is direct expensing of the whole thing, to different accelerated methods that we can use for tax planning purposes. For business management purposes, I like using a simple straight line approach. But folks will say, well, what about the trade-in value of the merger? You know, if I depreciate 100% over 5 years, so I'm taking 20% a year, but it's going to have value in 5 years that I can trade in on the next merger when I wear this one out and I got to get a new one. And that's true, but I like to not count the trade-in value or the salvage value of that asset when I'm looking at depreciation, because it's likely the next merger is going to cost more than the old one. So I use that as a buffer against that inflation. You know, I paid $100,000 for this one. In 5 years, I might be able to get $20,000 or $25,000 for it on a trade-in, but the next one's probably going to cost $130,000. So that's a buffer against inflation instead of counting it. You can count it, but I tend to not to. So simple, 100% over the useful life, whatever I determine that to be in my business. 5 years in this case, 20% a year depreciation. Interest. Well, as I said before, you can go right to your lender and say, what am I paying my lender? One of the things we tend to do, though, and especially today, is we use the rate we're paying, which is often, with farm credit, it's often a variable rate. If I use a variable rate and today's rates are low, or they were really low a year ago and they're starting to creep up, I could use too low a rate because I'm using a rate that's going to be for the life of the investment. And my rates might go up, especially now. We're seeing that start to happen. So I like to use what would it be if I fixed the rate. And I'll use that rate for my analysis. And right now, if you fixed a rate, you're looking at more like 6% rather than the 4.5% you might get if you were variable. Repairs. How do we know what the repairs are as a percent of investment? They're very consistent. We look at our benchmarks. And a dairy farm, for example, and we see this in our retail businesses as well with other types of equipment, equipment tends to cost between 10 and 12% of investment to keep it going. And we can see that just from looking at business and say, okay, I got $100,000 worth of equipment, and my equipment repairs are $12,000 a year. It's 12% of investment. It's what they tend to be. And so you can either use the benchmarks to get at this, or you can go to your own records and say, okay, what were my equipment repairs? And I had how much invested in equipment. What was my equipment repairs as a percent of investment? You can get it lower than that with good preventive maintenance. But you can either get that number from a benchmark, which is what this represents, or you can get it from your own records if you've been keeping good records. Property taxes tend to be 1.5-ish%. Depends on the mill rate in your town. But 1.5 to 2%, and insurance tends to be 1.5 to 2% of investment to put fire and liability insurance on a piece of equipment. So if we add those up, this merger is going to cost $42,000. 42% of investment. We said we're investing $100,000, so our annual overhead cost of buying that merger is $42,000. So if I'm a farm right now that just has a rake, and I rake my hay to chop it, and I'm thinking about buying a merger, that's more efficient at merging windrows into big windrows so my big chopper can chop more efficiently so I can get my hay harvested faster, I could go out and spend $100,000 on this pull-behind merger. I just had a client spend $400,000 on a self-propelled merger. So you can spend a lot more just to merge windrows, $400,000. You run this dirty 5, it's 42% of investment. My overhead is going to go up $42,000 a year in my business. How am I going to pay for that? This is a quick and dirty tool for seeing what's my added overhead cost as a result of an investment in my business. You can do it in minutes once you get to know how to do it. Yes?
So the overhead cost that increases by $42,000, for how long does that increase the value?
It's $42,000 per year for the life of the asset.
For the life of the asset?
And if we said it's a 5-year asset, it's going to be for the next 5 years, we have a $42,000 overhead cost in our business. How are we going to get that money back? Well, if we said overhead needs to be 25% of investment, you divide 42,000 by 25%, and that's 168,000. We need $168,000 of additional sales to cover that investment. So if this investment is allowing us to expand our business, then we need $168,000. If we're a hay enterprise that sells hay, we need to increase our hay sales by $168,000 a year to make that investment pay. Yes?
Rick, sorry, could you repeat how you got 168,000?
You take the $42,000 of additional investment, and remember we went back to our 5-line income statement goal. Oops, going the wrong way here. 5-line income statement goal is we want our overhead to be 25% of our sales. So one way to look at that is we're adding $42,000 to our overhead costs. These costs in our business are going up by $42,000 because we bought that merger. If we want to stay in balance, and we want that $42,000 to be only 25% of the sales, we just simply divide $42,000 by 25%. It's a little bit of algebra. It's one of the things I loved about algebra because you use it through life. I told my kids, if you don't get math anywhere, the one area you want to get it is algebra. If I want to know what the total is, and 42,000 is 25% of the total, it's a simple equation. 42,000 divided by the 25% tells me the total, this, needs to be 168,000. 42 divided by 0.25, 168,000. You can get it real quick. Once you learn this, it's so valuable. I have clients now who call me up and says, Rick, we need to run the dirty 5 on this thing. My father wants to buy it, and I think he's crazy. We need to run the dirty 5 and see what it's going to do to us, do to our overhead. And then you strategize, how do we cover that? Now, you may not be expanding your business with that merger. Instead, you might be wanting to get more efficient because you have this merger. We're going to save labor. We're going to get things done quicker. So we can say, okay, we got $42,000 in overhead, and we're going to be able to get rid of one guy because he was spending the whole year raking hay, and now we're going to be able to, we had 2 people raking hay, now we're going to have 1 person merging hay with this big merger. We get rid of a person, we were paying him for the summer $20,000, so there's 20 of the 42. But we can start getting at it pretty quick. What are the economics of it? Tremendous tool. It's a way to get at what the added overhead cost is of an investment real quick. Quick and dirty. And that's a way to remember it. It's the dirty 5. It's an acronym. 5 overhead costs that hit every time you make an investment. That's the 4th tool in our toolbox. The 5th tool is this concept of keys to profitability. There's 5 of them. The 5th of the 5 fives. This one really brings it all home. Remember when I said there's different styles that we tend to have that kind of come from here? I'm all about production. When I was a dairy farmer, I loved to see those cows dripping milk when they came in the parlor. They were just full of milk, and they were making lots of milk. And then before I went in for breakfast, I had to read the dipstick on the milk tank. Are we up on milk? If we're up on milk, I was excited, pumped up. That's what made my day. That's what motivated me to get out of bed in the morning. But if I know that's true, which one of these keys to profit then am I mostly focused on?
Number 1.
number one, gross sales, right? I'm all about getting more milk out of the cow and getting more milk in the tank. Maybe it's even more cows milking, which it was true. The more cows I could milk and the more milk they made per cow, the happier I was. I was really all about gross sales. One of the realities to running a profitable business is that there are 5 keys to profitability that drive the results of the business. And they all have pretty equal impact on the bottom line. The guys who are all about production, the style, the 3 key styles, all about production, that's focused more heavily on number 1. All about tight with a buck, they're more focused on number 5. And then the ones that are all about efficiency are focused on number 2. But let's talk about these 5 in a little more detail. Gross sales. If we're a dairy farm or if we're a turkey farm, the more units I can put out the door at whatever price I can get. If I'm a commodity producer, it's the price that the market is giving me. If I'm a retail person, then it's the price that I can command in the marketplace. What can I get for my product in the marketplace? It may not be controlled for me. I may be able to impact that in different ways. We'll talk about those in our case. But production, the more production I can get, the more price I can get my product drives gross sales. How do we measure that in our business? Well, we can look at it just in total dollars. I did $1 million a year last year. This year I did $1.1 million. My sales are up 10%. So I've increased my top line. Hopefully my bottom line went up as well. But it doesn't always happen. We can measure by total sales. We can measure it by production per unit. If we're a dairy farm, how much milk are we getting per cow? If we're a store, how many customers are coming in the door? And what a lot of ag businesses now, especially in southern New England, are ag retail. And they're doing retail sales from a store or from a farmer's market. So the more customers I can get to come to my market, come to my store every day or every year, drives my sales. And the more I can get them to buy, my sales per transaction will drive my total sales. So if I can get 1,000 people to come in the door and they all spend $10, I'm going to have $10,000 in sales for the weekend. That same 1,000 people come in the door and I can get $14 out of each one of them, I'm going to have $14,000 in sales for the weekend without any additional traffic coming through my store. So there's 2 ways to strategize on that. How do I get more people to come? How do I get them to spend more money when they're here? How do I get more cows in my barn? How do I get the cows that are here to make more milk? That all drives this top line focus for the business. What are my gross sales? And in theory, the more gross sales I have, the more profit at the end of the day I have. If we go back to that 5-line income statement, if my net margin is 15%, if that's my goal, if I can increase sales by 100,000 and I'm getting 15% net margin, in theory, my net margin should go up by 15,000. It's a good day. If I grew sales and my margin went up, making more money. But is that always happening? I see businesses grow their business, and when they were at 500,000 in sales, they were making pretty darn good money. And what happens when you're doing well at 500,000? You want to get bigger. Well, how do we get bigger? Do we get there by maintaining the margins we were doing per unit, or did we get aggressive about pushing, for example, if we were a retail farm stand and we were making decent money with 500,000 in sales, but we have to work harder now to get more customers into our location, a relatively rural location. We start spending a lot of money on advertising, and we maybe start lowering our prices a little bit to lure more people in the door. And we wake up 5 years later feeling, wow, we're at $1.2 million in sales. We were only 500,000 5 years ago. But we're not making any money. We're in the red at $1.2 million in sales. We're working 2.5 times harder, and we're not making anything than back when we were good old days. We were only 500,000 in sales. So growing sales does not always grow net margin. I see it all the time. Overly focused on productivity doesn't guarantee increased profitability, which ties back to viability. Even if you're not all about making lots of profit, if that's not what drives your business, and a lot of families I work with, that isn't their number one focus. But if you're not adequately profitable to be sustainable, you aren't going to be around long. So gross sales is a key to profit, but not the only one. Number 2 is efficiency. This one is probably the area where I see the most opportunity. And in that 5-line income statement, what did I say is the measure of efficiency? What's your measure? What's your efficiency score when you look at a 5-line income statement? Gross margin, I hear you whispering it, so you're not sure, but yes, gross margin, and I like to look at it as a percent of sales. Keep it simple. Gross margin as a percent of sales. If I'm at 22% gross margin, how does that compare to where I should be as a small ag-related business? Not good, right? I'm not converting raw materials into finished product in an efficient way. I'm taking, it's taking me 78% of my sales dollar to feed my turkey, to put bedding under my turkey, to buy the baby turkey, to pay the labor that does all the work around my turkeys, to process the turkey, put it in a package, and get it out to my customer. I have to use 78% of every sales dollar to do that. I only have 22 cents left for gross margin. And that 22 cents has to cover overhead and make me a profit. 22% gross margin, you got to be pretty lean on overhead to make any profit. And I find most small businesses to be under 25% is a real tough thing to do. So you're probably in the red if you only have 22% gross margin. That's poor efficiency when we say our goal is 40. So we need 40 cents left of every sales dollar, not 22 cents left. So what do we do to fix that? How do we improve efficiency? If we're a dairy farmer, we cannot control price, and our 5-year average price is $20. We can't do much about the price side of it to improve efficiency. Efficiency is price minus cost equals gross margin. Our price is out of our control for the most part. Dairies can control price a little bit through quality, through component levels. You can affect price a little bit. But your price is a commodity price. You can't drive that as much. So you have to focus on being more efficient on the cost side. If you're a retail business, I find most retail businesses, there's oftentimes opportunity on the cost side, most notably with labor. Poor labor efficiency in labor-intensive businesses usually is a big opportunity to drive gross margin up. But a lot of times it's feed related on a dairy, but in a retail business, I find it's price related. It's the top side. If our efficiencies are poor, we're not charging enough. We tend to be high-cost producers. If I'm growing a turkey on pasture and selling customers a fresh turkey at Thanksgiving, there's a little high cost associated with doing that. I can focus on cost control, but the bottom line is I got to get enough price for that product. Otherwise, my gross margin's not there, and I'm not going to be sustainable. But gross margin is the measure of production efficiency, which is the second key to profitability. And remember, these 5 keys to profit are all equally important. We need to balance all of them in order to get the best result. Let's look at, again, that 5-line income statement for a 5-year average results on dairy farms. I pointed this out before. Gross margin, that efficiency score for the top group, 44%. For the bottom group, 30%. The 30% group is losing money. They're 2% negative. The top group is 16% positive. And they're getting, of that 18% difference, 14 cents of it is coming from better efficiency. And they're getting similar prices. Actually, look who's getting the better price. This kind of is amazing. The bottom profit group is actually doing better at getting a better price. How are they doing that? Could be location of those farms. It could be their component levels are higher. They're getting a little bit higher price than on a 5-year average basis than the top profit farms. So they're not doing it with better price. They're doing it with better cost control. Their cost of goods, their feed, their labor, their supplies going into the cow, all those consumable cost of goods are only $11.52 compared to $14. So they're doing it with cost control and efficiency. The third key is capacity. Capacity is a measure of how effectively I am utilizing the assets I've invested in my business. I've got, again, we've talked about this before, buildings, equipment, land, tied up in my ag-related business. How much revenue can I generate from that fixed investment? Am I in balance? And again, to be in balance, we measure capacity with overhead as a percent of sales. That's that third line in that 5-line income statement. What is my fourth line? What is my overhead as a percent of my sales dollar? What do we say the goal is to be at about? How many pennies of the sales dollar? Nope. For overhead, 25%. Gross margin is 40. Overhead 25. Subtract the two, your net margin would be 15 if you can achieve that. If our overhead is too high, it means we have too much invested. There can be a good reason for it being too high because we just made a big expansion and we haven't grown into it yet. We're thinking about building a new store at our farm right now. We have an old store in our old dairy barn and we've kind of outgrown it. And we're thinking about taking the plunge of building a new store. It can be a huge investment. And we're very aware that in years 1, 2, and 3, after making that investment, that our overhead is going to go from right now, it's about 25% of sales, it's going to go to 40% of sales in the first year. We know that because we're adding a lot of overhead and it's going to take a little time to draw more people in the store and get our sales up to where we dilute that overhead down. So we can have high overhead as a percent of sales. Our capacity could look bad if it's post-expansion. But if it's being perpetuated, that's a challenge because we're not going to ever be able to be profitable because we've overcapitalized our business. Could be that we built too big of a store and at that location, we'll never get enough customers to dilute the overhead down. That's a bit of a challenge. What is that sweet spot? That's a point of diminishing returns equation there. How big and how fancy can we make the store given our location and our demographics? How many people can we get to come in the door to dilute that overhead down to 25%. If we build it and the best we could ever do only gets the overhead down to 35%, then we've overbuilt the store for that location. All of this stuff is part art, part science. These tools help with the science piece. The art piece comes from here. You get to know your demographic, you get to know your customers, you get to know what you think can happen. And some of it is intuition. And some of it is more science-based. Again, going back to that 5-line income statement on the dairies, we see the top profit group overhead, their capacity score is better, lower is better on this one, 27% compared to 31% for the bottom profit farms. It's only 4% difference here though, whereas it's 14% difference on gross margin. So we see there's more opportunity, and I find this in businesses across the board, whether it's the dairy industry, which is being shown here because we have good benchmarks, whether it's garden centers, ag retail businesses, turkey farms, orchards selling pies, whatever it is, ag businesses, either in the retail end or the commodity end, I see that most businesses, we see the same result. There's an opportunity here to sharpen the pencil on capital investment, but the bigger opportunity is in this production efficiency. And here we see 14% of opportunity between the top and bottom on efficiency, but only 4% of opportunity on the capacity. But they're both equally important. The fourth one is dairy husbandry or industry skills. Dairy husbandry on a dairy farm. Industry skills in general. This is a very important key to profitability. If I'm in the business of making automobiles, I better know what the designs and the trends are, what the right colors are to paint those cars. I better know how to design those engines and put the technology in them that customers want. Doesn't matter what business I'm in, I've got to know that business. That's one thing I think we do very well, thanks to UConn and other universities in the Northeast. I work with young people all the time who understand how to get a cow to milk, because they learned it at UConn. Or they know how to keep a turkey healthy because they learned it from Dr. Dairy at UConn. I see dairy husbandry, animal husbandry, plant science skills are very high among business owners. We're in the business because we're passionate about raising animals, raising crops, selling something to customers. So industry skills tend to be something we do very well. But it's a very important key to the bottom line of the business. The final one, this is the least fun one. Some people do it naturally. They're just tight with a buck. Top line people don't do it very well. They're not good at watching costs because they don't care what they spend as long as they get more production. If I get more customers in the door this weekend at my store, I'm happy. I'm not really focused on how much it costs me to get them there. I might have run a $5,000 blitz ad campaign for the past 3 weeks to get people to come into my fall harvest fest. And I got an extra 1,000 people, and I'm like, wow. Place was packed, and I got 1,000 more people. I spent $5,000 to get them. And those 1,000 people spent $10 each, or $10,000, and my gross margin is only 20% because it's not good. So I got $2,000 in gross margin, and I spent $5,000 to get them in. Did I make money on that? I just lost $3,000. But I feel good because I got 1,000 more people this weekend in my Harvest Fest. So cost control is an important piece of the equation as well. Top line people don't like looking at this. Bottom line people don't like talking about investing more. I mean, not bottom line, cost control people don't like looking at investing more because they're afraid, you know, I'm just spending money. Is it going to get me a return? So those are the 5 keys to profitability. And those overall are the 5 fives in our toolbox, okay? What I want to do for the next half hour to wrap up is to take this through a case study. And what we want to do in terms of applying this in our business is, what is our vision? That's the first step, that focus, that 5 keys to focus. Do we have a vision? Do we know where we want to be? That's not always an easy one to do. It should be fun, though, because if we're passionate about our agricultural entrepreneurial project, whatever it is, something new, or the farm we've been running for generations, whatever it is, if we're passionate about it, then figuring out where we want to be should be a fun exercise. It's one that should involve all your key players. Everybody who's involved in this generation of ownership, next generation of ownership should be involved, and sometimes key employees should be involved in figuring out where do we want this business to be 10 years, 20 years from now? What do we want it to look like? What are we all about? Do we have that vision? And have we developed priorities that are shared priorities by all of us involved in the business? Critically important. Having a shared vision, which I like to equate this also to a road trip. We're going to embark on a road trip, and I say, Chris, you want to go with me? I'm going on a trip. What would your first question be?
I'm in. Bring your hat. Bring your hat.
Joyce, what would your question be?
Where are we going?
Where are we going? Exactly. You're just trying to toy with me here. Everybody answers that. Where are we going? I'm not going to just go with you.
I'm not going to Florida this week.
Yeah, where are we going? That's the first question anyone would ask if I say I'm going on a road trip. You want to come with me? So why would we expect our children or our employees to go with us on this road trip that we're taking our business on if no one knows where we're going? I don't even know. There's only a handful of people who would be interested in being a part of that road trip. Everybody wants to know where we're going. But it's amazing the number of businesses that are just kind of drifting. They don't know where they're going. Define that. That's number 1. Priorities, if you're talking about a road trip, they're kind of the rules of the road that we're going to follow as we take this business towards its destination. The vision is the destination for our road trip. The priorities are the rules of the road. If we're going to go to Florida to check out how my house looks after the hurricane, because we have a house down there, I'm a little nervous right now.
I just got my picture.
Oh, it's still standing?
Lost the carport.
Oh,
That's okay.
you did well. We're going to take a road trip. Are we going to fly? Are we going to drive? If we're going to drive, are we going to stop after 8 hours, get a good dinner in a hotel room, and then drive again the next morning? Or are we going to take turns driving and get there straight, 24 hours of driving? You may have a different idea than me, but we should agree on those rules of the road before we leave. Otherwise, there's going to be some conflict on this trip. I'm tired. I'm ready to stop for dinner. Oh, no, no, no. We're driving straight through. Oh, you didn't tell me that. And then all of a sudden, things are not good. Same thing happens in businesses. So those priorities are the rules of the road we're going to follow as we take our business to its ultimate destination. Once we've figured those out, if we can pursue them with hard work, with passion, and with discipline, remembering that too much hard work can burn out the passion, and discipline is the toughest piece. We tend to like to chase the idea of the day and get off on tangents all the time. The more we can stay focused on the vision, the quicker we're going to get there. And then using those 5 5s toolbox to help you get there will make it happen. And these 5 5s, we'll review them quick. The 5 keys to effective focus, which I just revisited a minute ago. The 5-line income statement, which is what are the 5 lines? Gross sales minus cost of goods equals gross margin minus overhead equals net margin. If that's all you see about your business, those 5 lines, you're going to know an awful lot about what's going on with your business once you learn what they mean. 5-year averages, why is that important? Volatility is huge in agriculture. Weather, commodity prices, input prices, feed, which is a commodity. Commodity prices and weather are the big two that are very volatile. So if we look at 1 year, even in ag retail where we aren't as volatile in our pricing, because we're getting $15 for a pie this year, and last year we got $14.50. I mean, we're not seeing volatility in our pie price at our retail store, but we do see volatility in how many people show up at our store because of the weather. So we still have volatility. 5-year averages are important. The dirty 5, what is the dirty 5? It's a way to analyze a capital investment on a quick and dirty way to do it. And what does the acronym stand for? Depreciation, interest, repairs, taxes, that's property taxes, and the last I, insurance. And we can measure those as a % of investment, and it's a great way to say, okay, I'm making this investment in a new building or a new piece of equipment. What's the impact on my overhead cost per year? And how am I going to make that overhead pay? Is it through additional sales, or is it through improved efficiency? It could be both, it could be a combination, it could be one or the other. And finally, the 5 keys to profit, and what are they? Gross sales. Number 2, production efficiency, which on the 5-line income statement we measure with gross margin. Number 3 is capacity, which we measure with what on the 5-line income statement? Overhead as a % of sales. 4th one, industry skills. We got to know the business we're in. That's a kind of a given. It's the one we do pretty well because we're not usually milking cows if we're not passionate about it and we don't know how to do it. Otherwise, we're not really in that business. So we do that one well. And the 5th one, the cost control. So those are the 5 5s. Okay, let's take them now through a case study. And so I don't pick on one of my clients. I'm going to pick on my business. Because this is really what we embarked on a few years ago. I mentioned we used to be dairy farm. We transitioned to turkeys. So let's go through how we did our analysis to make the decision of whether we should raise turkeys or not. And using the 5 tools, 5 5s that I just went through. Planning on raising turkeys, we want to build a small processing facility and production facility to allow us to get started, okay? And what we want to know is how many turkeys do we need to sell in order to meet our goal, our objective? So what we're going to do here, and this is something I didn't mention earlier, I should have, is we're going to build the budget from the bottom up. Because using these tools, really, How many here have worked on budgets, either for your business or for customers? Just about everybody, right? Where do you typically start when you start a budget? What do you start with? Yeah, maybe what you have today, but what line in the income statement do you usually start with? Can't hear you. Expenses? All right, great. You start with expenses. I find a lot of folks start with income. Okay, I'm milking 50 cows. They're making 25,000 pounds per cow. I think I can get, $18 for my milk. So my income is going to be 300,000, whatever it is. Most folks start with the top line, and then they work their way down. At the end of the day, they say, do I have any profit? I see that over and over my 30 years at Farm Credit. That's where most people approach budgeting. I like starting from the bottom line. One of the things I like to say about that is if we start at the top line and work our way down, it puts us into the paradigm of being reactive profit takers. Okay, I'm milking this many cows, this much price, this much, and it's costing me this, and I end up with 2% net margin. Kind of stinks. It's not much for all my hard work. I'm a reactive profit taker when I approach the process that way. I try to get folks to shift from that. Use these 5 Fives toolbox to start becoming proactive profit makers. In order to shift that paradigm, let's not start with the top line and work down and see what's left. Let's start with the bottom line. Say this is what we want or expect or need for profit to be sustainable, and let's work our way up to see what do we need to do to make that happen. So now we're proactive profit makers instead of reactive profit takers. And in agriculture, we tend to be reactive profit takers. You hear it all the time. Folks complaining about the weather, the price of milk, the price of grain, whatever, and it's killing their profit, and it is what it is. I take what I get. So let's go the other way. Start from the bottom line. Start with our profit. So step one is how much profit do we need? Now, what do we need profit for in a business? There's 3 big reasons we need profit. What are they? Let's see if we can come up with all 3. To make it a viable business, that's generic. Let's get more specific. 3 reasons we need profit. What is that profit needed for specifically? So we can grow, exactly. Reinvest in the business. We need profit to reinvest. If we don't have profit to reinvest, our business is going to be stagnant. It can't grow. And if it doesn't grow, it's going to wither on the vine and die someday. So you need profit to reinvest for growth. Excellent. What else do we need profit for?
To pay existing obligations.
We need to pay, well, you're almost there. Profit is what's left after we pay our bills. But there is another payment we make from profit. It's principal, loan payments. We need profit to pay our debt. We aren't going to get Farm Credit to lend to us if we don't show enough profit to pay them back. Or they're going to say, it's a bad risk. You can't afford to pay me back. I'm not going to make you the loan. So we have to have enough profit to pay the loan back. We have to have enough profit to reinvest in our business for growth. And what's the third one? Eat. We need profit to pay ourselves. I'm working my butt off in this business. If I don't have if I can't take some money out of the business to have the quality of life that I'm looking for, then why am I doing it, right? So let's start talking about this. We've kind of done some homework, and we said it's going to take $100,000 for us to build a 2,500 bird facility. We could raise and process 2,500 turkeys, in this facility. And it's going to be $100,000. It's a fairly low number because we have our old dairy barn and we're going to convert it. So we don't have to build from scratch. We can convert existing buildings, which is very common, when we're looking at a business concept. So we go to the bank and the bank tells us, if your business plan looks good, we could give you a 10-year note on that facility. So how much principal do we need a year on a $100,000 note if we're going to pay it off in 10 years? We need $10,000 of profit just to pay the bank, right? So we know we need that much profit. And we also need profit to pay ourselves. And at the time that we were doing this, my son was going to run it. And he was working on a farm up the road, and he was making about $25,000 a year on that farm. And he was going to quit that job, or 20,000, I'm sorry, I said 25. 20,000 a year. He was going to leave that job. He was working and going to school at the time, and he was going to run the turkey enterprise. And he said, Dad, if I leave that job and give up my 20,000, I need to replace it. So we figured this thing needed to make 20,000 to pay my son. We didn't talk yet about reinvestment. That may have been a mistake, because that was a very important piece, but we said we need at least $30,000. 20 for owner's draw back to us for the work my son was going to do, and 10,000 to give the banker. So we need $30,000 of profit. So we've got the first line of our 5-line income statement done now. Our bottom line, $30,000. So what's next? If we go up the income statement, what's the next line up? Under net margin, if we go up from the bottom? Overhead. So how much overhead are we going to incur to do this? What tool in the what tool in the 5 fives are we going to use to figure this out? It's capacity, but what tool in the toolbox are we going to use? We've got that tool belt on. Which one are we going to pull out now to work on this one?
35.
35, exactly. So we know we have a $100,000 investment in this processing facility. That includes the equipment, building, and renovations. $100,000. What's our overhead cost going to be? Well, we ran the dirty 5, depreciation, interest, repairs, taxes, and insurance as a percent of investment, and they added up to 25%. We had a 10-year life. It was kind of tied in with the 10-year note that the bank would give us, but we figured these assets are about worth good for 10 years before we'd have to renovate the facility. So we got a 10-year facility, so that's 10% for depreciation. Interest was 6, so that brings us to 16%. Repairs, part of it is buildings, part of it is equipment. Buildings tend to be 3% of investment. Equipment tends to be 12% of investment, like I mentioned earlier. So we were looking at maybe 6. That brings us to 22. And then we had interest, property taxes and insurance, the final 2 of the dirty 5, which are about 1 or 2% each. That brought us to 25%. So we quickly used the dirty 5 in a matter of minutes. It's a quick and dirty method. But it's amazingly accurate, as long as we make sound assumptions about the life of the asset and things like that. We knew we were going to have 25% overhead as a percent of that investment. Now, why is it nice to look at the percent of investment?
The more you grow, the more percentages go up.
That's true, the more you invest. So if we say, if we get done with this and say, this thing doesn't work, what could we do? We could say, well, maybe we need to invest less. Maybe we've overbuilt the facility for a startup. So let's go to a smaller scale facility, and we can still use the 25% on the lower number. We're going to go to 80,000 investment times 25%. Now we've reduced it from 25 to 20. We can quickly get there on the overhead because we know it's a percent of investment. Very, very easy to make adjustments. The other thing it could be is we did a $100,000 estimate, but that was our own estimate, and then the builder gets back to us because we've hired a contractor to make these renovations, and he says, I can do it for you. It's going to be 140. Like, oh boy. Now we've got to rerun this on 140, but it's 25%, so we can tweak that number really easy once you know the percent. So dirty 5 has that additional value because it's a percent of investment. Overhead costs, I didn't talk about this earlier, but they include a few other things like advertising. That's a fixed cost, and utilities. And we kind of figured out that the equipment we're putting in this facility is going to cost us about $10,000 a year in propane and electric. And we wanted to spend about $15,000 on advertising because we got 2,500 turkeys potentially to sell. And we really we just kind of plucked that number out of the sky. The way we came up with it is our local radio station was saying, we could give you an ad campaign on the radio for $15,000. And it's a bargain package. My wife thought I was nuts when I said, let's do it. But we did it. And it paid. But It was a risk. It's overhead. Once you commit to 15,000 in that contract, you're going to have 15,000 whether you sell one turkey or all 2,500 turkeys. But we decided to say, if we're going to do this, we got to get the word out that we're going to have Thanksgiving turkeys for sale. So we did that campaign with the radio station for 15. So 10 for utilities based on the equipment we were putting in, and 15 for advertising, plus the dirty 5. So how much overhead are we going to have? 50,000. So we're building the budget from the bottom up. We wanted how much profit? 30,000, right? And we know we're going to have 50,000 in overhead based on the investment we're making. So how much gross margin do we need? The next line up on our income statement. We need 80,000 of gross margin. So what's our next question? Step 3. What kind of gross margin are we going to generate? And what I'm interested in is, what is our percent gross margin going to be? Goes back to that 5-line income statement and that efficiency score. What is our percent gross margin going to be? How efficient can we be at producing turkeys in this facility? Now, how do you get there? Well, first you got to figure out, what am I going to sell my turkeys for? And we figured $4 a pound. How do we get that number? Well, we went on Google and searched turkey farms all over New England, and we saw them getting as much as $4 a pound. So we said, we're going to build our budget around a $4 a pound price. What are our cost of goods? Cost of goods, remember, are not the fixed costs. These are the variable costs. These are the consumables. These are the raw materials that we're going to turn into a pound of turkey. The big one is feed, but we also have bedding, buying the baby poults, supplies. Those are bags for packaging them in and things like that. And then labor. Now, how do we know what these numbers are? If we've been raising turkeys, which at the time we were raising 30 turkeys, processing them by hand, but we were raising 30 turkeys, and we kept track of how much feed they ate, how much bedding went into them. We knew on that little mini batch exactly what our cost per pound was, because we did a little experiment for 2 or 3 years. And we knew that these were the costs per pound. Feed was a little higher than that, but we were buying bag feed, and we're going to go to bulk feed, so we knew we were going to reduce that a little bit. So we just budgeted that in. If you don't have a little history, a little sample project to compare to, or you're already in the business, so you have good records, you can go to Extension. You can go to, there's a lot of sources out there, Farm Credit, we have benchmarks. We don't have one for turkeys, but if it's a dairy or a greenhouse, we do have benchmarks. But here we actually raised 30 turkeys for 3 or 4 years. We had some good numbers, good records. We saw that this is what it was going to cost. So we're selling them for $4, and they're going to cost us, our cost of goods are $2. Now, what's missing from these animal husbandry people? What's missing here? I'm sorry? How many turkeys? And we're going to get to that in a minute. But what's missing in our cost of goods here? It's here, it's buried, but it's not on a separate line.
Processing.
Nope. Processing is, well, processing is there, but it's in supplies and labor. Mortality, right? The biggest cost of raising turkeys is mortality. How many do you lose? You know, and that's built into here, because if we start, 30 and we end up with 27, we had 10% mortality, but we were feeding them along the way, and we bought all the babies. We bought 30 babies. We only processed 27. So when we took the 27 divided by the weight, these costs per pound had mortality built into them. I don't have a separate line on there, and I've had people challenge me on that. What about mortality? And that's huge. That's the biggest factor driving profitability in turkeys. So what will our gross margin be? We're selling them for $4. Our cost of goods are $2. What's our gross margin? $2. And what's that as a percent? Easy math, right? 50%. Is that better or worse than our goal? Better. We were like, wow, I think we're onto something here. We got a little niche market that might have better than average gross margin opportunity. So, the fourth step, how much do we need to sell? We're building that budget from the bottom up, right? What did we say we needed in gross margin? Remember? 30 in profit, 50 in overhead, so we need 80 in gross margin. How do we figure out what we need in sales if we need to get 80,000 in gross margin? We know we think we can get a 50% gross margin. What do we need in sales to achieve that gross margin? Back to that little algebra that I went through with the overhead at 25%, what's the total need to be? Gross margin is 50%, what does the total need to be? Once you get this one in your head, it's so valuable, this little relationship. We know we need 80,000 in gross margin. We think we can get 50% gross margin. So what do we need in total sales? We simply divide the 80,000 by the 50%. Simple as that. It's algebra. Simple, basic algebra. Keep that in your head. If you can remember this, because it drives break-even analysis, it drives viability analysis. It makes it so easy. We've determined we need this much gross margin, because that's what our overhead and profit goals are. We think we can get 50% gross margin based on our little cost of goods budget and price expectation. Oops, sorry. So we divide, what's the sales goal need to be? Easy math, right? 160,000. Usually you need a calculator, but when it's that simple, you don't need a calculator. We need sales of 160,000. Now, how many turkeys do we have to raise to do that? Well, if they weigh 20 pounds on average, which is what we found they get to based on our production model, and we're getting $4 a pound, we're getting $80 for a turkey. And if we need 160,000 in sales and we're going to get $80 a turkey, we need to raise 2,000 turkeys in order to hit our profit goal at that pricing and at that cost structure, right? Is that a feasible investment? What did we say the capacity of the facility was? 2,500. We're hitting break even at less than capacity. It makes sense. But there's always curveballs in every business plan. What if we find out that our neighbors down the road are selling turkeys for $3.20 a pound? Somehow we missed that point. Or we were being too optimistic in our first analysis. Maybe some of the ones we were getting were more urban areas, and maybe we realized in our rural spot, our neighbor's only getting $3.20. My wife, who is the cost control person in our business, says, wait a minute. You guys are pie in the sky, you're gonna get $4 for these turkeys. I think you're only gonna be able to get $3.20. So we revisited the business plan at $3.20. We're selling them now for $3.20 instead of $4. They still cost us the same $2 that we calculated before. Our gross margin is now $1.20 a pound. What's the percent gross margin? That one's harder to do in your head than the last one. $1.20 divided into $3.20 is 38% gross margin instead of 50%. So my son and I were all excited that we're thinking we got a business plan here that can generate better than average gross margin. Now my wife, who loves to be the killjoy, says, you guys are dreaming. We use $3.20. We're coming in at 38%, which is closer to the 40 that we say is a goal. It's like, maybe she's right. Maybe we were dreaming. So now how many do we need to sell? We still need to cover 80,000 in gross margin, but now we got to divide by 38%. We need 210,000 in sales instead of 180,000 in sales to break even. But it gets worse because we're selling the turkey for $3.20 a pound. So instead of getting $80 a bird, we're only getting $64 a bird. So now we need 210,000 in sales divided by $64 a bird. We need to sell 3,289 turkeys to break even. So we have two scenarios now to look at. First one is 2,000 birds at $4 a pound with gross margin of 50%. We'll break even. The second one is 3,289 birds at $3.20 a pound to break even. 38% gross margin. But our facility only has a capacity of 2,500 birds. So if we only can sell our turkeys for $3.20 a pound, is this project feasible? You won't even hit break even. You'll never hit break even. You'll never make money with this at $3.20 a pound. $4 a pound, you'll break even at 2,000 birds. You could still grow to 2,500, start making some decent, even better than budgeted profit. Now, what do you do? If you're faced with these two options, what do you do?
Figure out how efficient you can make your operation.
You could look at your cost of goods and say, is there a way we can trim those costs so we can get our gross margin to improve? That's one. Another one would be you could go back and try to reduce the cost of your processing facility and production facility below the 100,000, see if we can build it for less overhead so that we have a lower break even. The third one is we want to stick with this one. I'm going to prove my wife is wrong. Then I'll be in trouble anyway. But we stick with that one. How do we do that? We focused on our neighbor was raising his turkeys in his old dairy barn inside. Not neighbor, but he was 10 miles, 20 miles down the road. He was our closest competition. We're going to raise our turkeys on pasture. So we believe instead of $3.20 a pound, we can get $4 a pound for our turkeys, and we'll be able to make it work. Now, is that the art or the science of the plan? That's the art. Part of that is gut. Can we do that? Can we convince customers to pay a premium for our turkeys because they're differentiated from the competition down the road? So, you know, these tools are rooted in the science, but the other half is the art. And that's the tough part. You know, we talk about business planning and budgeting. You've got hard assumptions and soft assumptions. The hard assumptions are the science. If we have a cost of $2, and we raise them for $4, we charge $4 for them, we're going to make 50% gross margin. That's pretty much a science. That's math. The art is, will people buy them for that? Can we differentiate them in a way that will get customers to pay that? There's a risk to the art piece.
Now, so I approach you as a business owner and I want a $100,000 loan to build my turkey facility. And I'm telling you that I can get $4 a pound. My neighbor's getting $3.20. I say I'm going to be certified organic and pasture raised and locally produced and sustainably grown. And how do I actually convince you as a banker that I have any art?
First of all, if you came in with all of that budget done, bottom-up budget done, using those 5 fives, if you came in with that, you're going to blow me away because almost nobody does. They come in and say, this is what I want to do, and they have no idea whether it's feasible or not. They just have a dream, an idea. They might have a budget built from the top down, which I've seen so many of those that are pure BS. Just like, okay, but it's not real. And they don't even know why it's real or not. But if you did this, and you can come in with these two scenarios to the lender and say, if I only get $3.20, which is the competitive price, it's not going to work. But I'm building my model around $4, and this is why I'm differentiating. I'm pasture raised. You might want to go to further research, go to other areas where there is an option. In our area, there wasn't much of an option at the time. There was fresh turkeys were raised in a coop. I'm going to start providing them raised in pasture. What's the difference going to be? Go to Vermont where there was both. What's the price difference there? Go to other parts of the country where there's both. Is there a premium? If you can do a little homework and support that it's not just my gut tells me, but a lender, when someone comes in with all of this done and understands it, not just has it done, but understands it, and then says, my gut tells me that I can get it based on some research I've done, and I understand my cost structure. I understand that this is not feasible. This is, but I think I can do this. Your lender is going to be blown away by it. Now, you have to have other things. There's 5 C's to credit. You got to have adequate collateral. You got to have adequate character, they call it. It's credit rating. Your credit rating reflects your character. Have you over your life, or up until this point in your life, done what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do something? Your credit report kind of tells them that, because if you say you're going to pay this loan back and you do, then you've got history of, they're going to put more faith in your gut now, because you say, I think I can do this, and in the past, I've always met my obligations. That gives them higher expectation that this time you're going to be able to pull this off as well. So there's more that goes into it than just this, but this is huge. You come in with this kind of analysis done. This does not take long. This is a relatively quick exercise to get this done.
Wait, what was the third C?
Well, there's 5 C's to credit. 5 C's to credit. Now you're going to test me to make sure I can come up with them all. Chris, you help me if I can. Character, which is measured by your credit rating, because it says, do I do what I say I'm going to do? Collateral. Capacity, which collateral is just having the assets to secure the loan. Capacity is having the repayment ability to pay the loan back, which is what your budget says.
Conditions.
Conditions, the loan conditions that go into the, well, no, condition is financial condition, excuse me. Conditions from the borrower's end is financial condition, which is, do I have any net worth right now? Do I have, a balance sheet that is healthy? Or am I at, 20% net worth now? For every dollar of asset I have 80 cents of debt and only 20 cents of asset, of net worth that's mine. I'm already heavily leveraged. That's not a good condition. So that's going to negatively affect you. But if I'm the other way around, for every dollar of asset I have 20 cents of debt and I own 80 cents. So I have 80% net worth. That's a strong financial condition. That's the 4th one. What's the 5th C of credit?
Covenants.
Covenants? Is that it, Joe? That might be it. I didn't have those 5s in my head. I have my 5 5s. That one goes back to my loan officer days. That may be it. Covenants. That's the way the loan gets structured. How much flexibility is there in 10-year loan, 20-year loan, 5-year loan? What kind of structure and does it have to have the loan covenants? But 5 C's of credit are important. These, though, address a lot of it. Tells your lender whether you understand what's going on. And these 5 5s, fairly simple tools, boiling a sea of numbers down to some workable numbers that really tell me that I have efficiency, I have the right overhead investment balance. And I think the most important one is, am I focused? Do I understand my priorities? And do I have a defined vision? And am I able to work on it with hard work, with passion, and with discipline? And this, having done this, tells an awful lot about the fact that you are pretty focused because you're already at this point when you go into the lender.
I think the lender also wants to see risk management, because what happens when those birds all get sick because they're outside on pasture?
Right. Absolutely. We're going to hear about risk management this morning,
And they're
or this
gonna
afternoon.
want to see that you're not just looking through rose-colored glasses. And so to show them what could go wrong, I think is...
Excellent point, Joyce. Excellent point. Risk management. What happens if my turkeys all get eaten by fisher cats?
Yeah.
We had a year when we had them on pasture and we were only raising 300 turkeys and 68 of them, very high percentage of our crop, got killed by fisher cats in one night, by one fisher cat in one night. 68 turkeys, and this was in October, so these birds were, big birds. We had a lot of money tied up in those turkeys, and 68 of them in one night.
Wow.
What do we do? What's our risk management plan? We have a guardian dog now. Exactly what we did. His name is Blue. He's an Anatolian shepherd, stands about this tall, and no fisher cat or coyote or bobcat would dare come in the pasture when he's out there. I've seen him with a fox in his mouth. Picked it right up and just shook it. And then one of our employees felt bad for the fox, so told him to drop it. And the fox limped away, but he would have killed it if we didn't stop him. But he's protected our turkeys. That's exactly what we did. But good point, risk management. What if scenarios? I mean, there's one right there. What if I can only get 320? We can go on and on and on with what ifs that what if I lose 20% of my turkeys? What does that do to my cost? And what do I do about that? Some of those contingencies are having a healthy balance sheet. One of the things that's a reality is, when you're dealing with a volatile industry like agriculture, you have to be able to go underwater at times due to unexpected events. So your biggest risk management to me is having a healthy balance sheet. A healthy balance sheet with some liquidity is your air tank for when you go underwater. Some people can hold their breath for a few minutes underwater, but if you're going to be underwater too long, we're all going to drown eventually if we don't have an air tank. And our air tank in a business is our balance sheet, our assets. Have enough liquidity, have enough assets. The point made, when you make a profit, some of it has to get reinvested in growth and reinvested in building liquidity so that we have cushion. That's very important.